it was like my midlife crisis decision. I didn't buy a motorcycle. I joined a startup with no customers.
That startup was Snowflake. Chris Degnan was the first and only sales hire. 11 years later, he led sales from zero to over $4 billion in revenue and helped take the company to a $100 billion valuation.
Sometimes I still kind of am like, I'm in the matrix. I don't think this really happened.
But the same company that would redefine enterprise data almost died more than once. Chris stayed through the kind of hypergrowth that breaks most people and most companies.
The average CRO tenure is about 18 months, and you lasted an incredible run, 11 years through 4 different CEOs. How?
His secret? All right, let's get into it.
Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Sophie. Appreciate it.
It is fantastic to have you, Sharon. I don't actually know if you realize, but 8 years ago to this very month, you actually came on a version of this podcast.
I did not know that.
Yeah. It had a different name.
Yeah.
It was called Sales Hacker at the time.
Okay.
So GTM Fund's general partner, Max Altschuler, once founded Sales Hacker, grew to about 175,000 members globally before it got acquired by Outreach in 2018.
Yeah.
And so you were actually on Sales Hacker. You were episode 28.
That's funny.
8 years
It
ago
was probably my
this month.
first podcast I ever did. It might have been. That's crazy.
Yeah. 8 years ago, you sat in a way, this very seat,
Yeah.
and you were at about 100 million in ARR.
Yeah.
Now, you're projected to have 4 billion in revenue.
Yeah.
So from when you first sat in the seat at 100 million ARR to 4 billion, we're going to essentially go through some of the go-to-market moves, the lessons, the stories that really helped make that scale possible. You've actually documented a lot of these learnings in your new book, which I've got on the table here.
Thank
Lucky
you.
to pick up a copy and dive in and read it. For anyone who is not already familiar, it's called Make It Snow. We're going to have it available for listeners.
Awesome. Great.
So let's start from the beginning. You joined Snowflake, pre-product, no sales team. Why? Why join?
I joke it was like my midlife crisis decision. I didn't buy a motorcycle. I joined a startup with no customers. I had been in enterprise technology sales. I had worked at companies like EMC, and then I went to a startup. Ironically, kind of weird, small world is that the guy that I work for is now infamous. He was caught on the kiss cam on the Coldplay concert.
Oh yeah.
But to his credit, I did learn a lot from him, Andy. And the benefit of me going to this small company called Avexa was I certainly learned to be a second line leader there, as well as I had this guy John McMahon who was on our board, and so Avexa got bought by my old employer EMC, and a bunch of the John McMahon network wanted to hire me as like a VP of the West or something like that. And it turns out I didn't really like a lot of the sales leaders that were recruiting me. And then I found this startup called Snowflake. Didn't love the name, and it was in stealth mode, but I really liked the founders. I really liked the investor, Mike Spicer. And so that got me excited. And, I was pretty hesitant still, and then Mike was trying to close me on joining the company, and he said, "What do you need?" I said, "Well, I need someone to be on the board who cares about me." And he's like who? And I said, "Well, on my last company, we had this amazing leader, John McMahon." He's like, "Well, I know John," and he's like, "Well, someone like him." And like literally the next day, John McMahon's on our board.
Wow.
And he's like, and so Mike's like, "Okay, it took your final objection off the table," and yeah, sure enough, so. And it was critical for part of my success of having John. I could not have done the job without John being on our board. I took a risk. I took a big risk. I took a pay cut. But I wanted to do something fun and work with fun people, and that's pretty much why I chose the job.
Pretty productive midlife crisis.
Yeah.
Motorcycle.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I'm sure there are near-death experiences in both, which we're going to jump into.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
Where did the name Snowflake come from? That was already around when you joined.
So the founders, and I would consider Mike Spicer a founder. His kids were on the ski team up in Tahoe. Benoit, his kids were on the ski team. He actually lived in Tahoe, and he would commute down to Oracle. And then Thierry, liked to ski. So they all liked to ski. Snow comes from the clouds. We were a cloud data warehouse. And there's a loose affiliation to a schema, a database schema called Snowflake schema. And so they kind of took that and ran with it and called it Snowflake. And trust me, I did not love the name when I was out there trying, because people were not very kind to us in the beginning about our name. So
Tables turn.
yeah, tables turn.
Tables
for sure.
turn.
Make it snow, baby.
And so, okay, you join pre-product, no sales team, you're number one salesperson in the organization. You're the first person.
Yes.
What did those first couple moves look like?
So when I got there, I started, just trying to talk to people. There was no, I couldn't sell the product. And so I started to just try to get feedback. And so I would just reach out blindly to a bunch of different people, and say, hey, this is what we've built. And it helped me hone exactly what the differentiators were. The founders would explain it hey, this is unique. And then I would tell, our prospective advisor companies of hey, this is what we built. And so that was my beginning. It was just reaching out and saying, hey, do you have 15 minutes? I'd love to tell you what we're building. We're a stealth mode data warehousing company. We've done something really unique where we've separated storage from compute, and we natively ingest semi-structured data. I'd love to tell you, get feedback, see if something you'd use. And so that was my pitch. And I did that a lot. So that was the beginning. And that's how I got, into customer conversations.
Incredible. And how did you start to grow that sales organization, hire the right people, scale the process, and really take it from zero?
Well, so when I started to figure out who was our ideal customer, I then would start building lists, literally scraping websites. Now you can probably do this all with AI, but I was doing it by hand, going on job boards and stuff like that. And that was, and then spamming people. And so I needed help doing that. So I hired an intern, Alyssa Wong, who's still actually at Snowflake, which is awesome. But she was in college at the time, and so her and I started building lists, and then I hired an SE, and then he and I would just go out and tell the story, and then from there, what would happen is I would try to get. My goal every week was to get 8 customer-facing meetings a week. So that was my goal. And and so if I got that 8 meetings a week, that was great. But what would happen is, say I'd go to New York, I would then not be in front of my computer, not building lists, and I'd miss out on getting meetings for the following week. And so that's when I started hiring my first 2 sales development reps. So I hired 2 SDRs, Jordan and Tom. And Jordan is still at Snowflake. And then from there, we started hiring sellers. So,
Quick pause because it's event season and this is a game changer. At GTM Fund, our portfolio companies, our LP operators companies, we're all planning events right now, as I'm sure you are. Sales kickoffs for next year, company retreats, conferences, you name it. It's a lot of work. Planning these company events has been made simple though with BoomPop's AI-powered platform and event planners. They handle everything from venues to experiences, so you can curate an incredible event without being bogged down by the planning process itself. And as a listener of GTM Now, you're eligible for an exclusive discount, full service event planning for just $99 per person. Terms and details are on the webpage in the show notes, which is boompop.com/GTM fund. Head there to start planning your next offsite.
And I heard in the book, one of my favorite quotes is that you said, if you have to tell people what to do, they're in the wrong company.
yes.
How did you ensure, and how can founders listening ensure, and leaders listening ensure that they're hiring the right people that are self-motivated?
It's hard. I mean, I think if you hire someone from a big company to come into an early stage startup, they're used to this infrastructure being around them. They're used to having SDRs. They're used to having, Salesforce. There's a company I'm advising right now where we hired a sales leader in there, and he walked in and he's like, yeah, there's no Salesforce. All of the contacts of these customers they're talking to are in the cell phone of the founders. He's like, so I have to get an export of their cell phone and put it in and build my own Salesforce. So there's just a lot of things when I'm looking for people that have had are self-starters, that have had self-motivated, that have to do things on their own. if you're working at a large company like Salesforce, there's all this infrastructure is already there for you. And so those probably aren't the best people to hire when you're building a startup. So you're looking for people that have that grit. And then there's questions you can ask and tell me about tough situations you've been in your life. You're looking for them to, where have they overcome challenging situations? And you kind of learn a lot about a person. So there's stuff that you can ask. There's experience they have on we had a lot of success hiring people from the reseller community because they were basically having to represent all these different products and they were selling them almost as a reseller. So we had a lot of different backgrounds, but that worked pretty well.
Yeah. What's your opening line in an interview?
Tell me your life story.
Yeah.
So, so tell me where you were born to how you got to where you're at, because I want to learn about you. And
Right.
I think that's the thing I want to know, where, I don't care where you went to school, but did you work during college? Did you, when you got out of college, what did you do? What were you looking to do? Did you know what you wanted to do? A lot of times, people like hiring, athletes from college. So you just you're trying to learn about them. And that's kind of part of the story that I'm looking for. So, yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then on the inverse, you you were at Snowflake for a long time and you recently left, but the average CRO tenure is about 18 months.
Yep.
And you lasted an incredible run, 11 years through 4 different CEOs.
Yes.
How?
Hey, I sometimes I still kind of am like, I'm in the Matrix. I don't think this really happened, but I think so I asked John McMahon that exact same question, how did I stay in this job? Because I was not really sure about it. And I think the thing that he said is, Chris, you would ask good questions, you would take feedback, and you would act on that feedback. So the thing that what happens, and what I saw even with some of the leaders that I had hired as we grew, is people thought Snowflake was successful because of them, and that was never the case. We were all part of this amazing. We were selling an amazing product. We built an amazing go-to-market machine, but there was no one person in my sales organization that was responsible for the success that Snowflake had. It was a team effort, and so I think being self-aware, getting that feedback, acting on that feedback, and sometimes that feedback was hard. Hey, Chris, you're screwing up here, and having to make tough decisions is not always fun. But that was kind of, I'd say that in a nutshell is what the feedback that I got from John. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of founders that ideally are making their first sales hire, and they want that person to be the next Chris.
Yeah.
And conversely, a lot of leaders that aspire to have the type of run that you did.
Yes.
And so that kind of quality is really interesting and important for people to understand.
Yes.
It sounds like curiosity, if you were to boil it down to something. Curiosity and receiving feedback well and being able to iterate upon it.
Yeah, I think, being humble, because again, I found that when we were building the company, I was the same way to a sales development rep that just started as I was to our CEO. And so what I found was that a lot of times there were good people that we hired along the way that were big company people, and they would do well managing up, but then when it came to managing their team or being nice to people, that were not peers or higher, they were not. And so I'm very respectful. It drives me crazy when the people are super disrespectful. I don't have time for that, and that's not great, and that can ruin a culture of a company. So I think it's just be humble, take feedback, act on that feedback, and act on it quickly. You have to have a sense of urgency. One of my favorite traits of Snowflake's chief marketing officer, Denise Persson, who I co-wrote the book with, is that she has this high sense of urgency. So when I'm in a meeting, when I was working with her and I was in a meeting with her, we'd come up with some idea and she'd be like, okay, let's do it right now. And I'm like, you're the best. Because there isn't oh, let's do it in 3 months from now. No, let's do it right now.
Yeah.
And she challenged me, you should do this right now. And I think that's what I really appreciate about people, is having a high sense of urgency. And I, sometimes there are companies that have sales leaders that don't have that sense of urgency, and then that's not great for the company. And I think, I advise a bunch of different companies, and one of the companies I advise, they had a sales leader that didn't have this sense of urgency, and the CEO just called me and said, like, hey, I'm trying to get this sense of urgency going, and he's like, he's not acting on it. And I'm like, well, this is like, it's like dating someone. It's like if you date someone and have this trait that's annoying, it's only going to get worse the longer you're with them. So you can't fix
Isn't
it.
there like a learn to love about it?
Maybe, but not certain things. There's certain things that will really annoy you, and so that was some of the stuff that I picked up along the way. So yeah, have a high sense of urgency, be humble, work hard, be smart about what you sell. Like I always say, be a student of what you sell. So I think those are some key traits of great salespeople.
Mm-hmm. And you spoke to Denise. You both had an incredible growth trajectory together at Snowflake.
Yes.
And you were aligned at the hip. You went into board meetings together.
Yes.
There's one thing to hire really humble and great people, but there's another to actually foster the alignment necessary for growth. Yes. How did you and Denise foster that alignment? And how can other leaders think about creating that space for alignment?
Well, it goes number one with transparency, is being honest with each other, having that sense of urgency, and I think, rolling up your sleeves and being able to do it. So like when Denise started, she had been a successful chief marketing officer at public companies before. And she came in and we were doing $3 million in revenue. And I think I was struggling with the demand generation function of Snowflake prior to Denise coming into the company, and so I would argue with the previous team around what a definition of what a marketing qualified lead was, or an MQL, and so having those conversations for sales leaders is incredibly frustrating. And Denise picked up on that right away, and she says, "Listen, we're not going to talk about what an MQL is. All we're going to talk about is qualified meetings for your salespeople." And so from there, that's like she had me at hello. I'm like, okay, I like this woman a lot. And so from there, what she would do is, she wouldn't tell anyone on her team to go do something. She would go and every week sit down individually with this SDR, the individual SDRs, the individual AEs, the individual managers, and tell me what about these leads? Where are they coming from? What's good, what's bad, what's ugly. And she would get that firsthand. And like that, I was so appreciative of that. And I think that's the thing that I love about people that have had success that can come down and do the hard things, and not tell people, go do this, go do that. No, you do it and see. And then you have so much more credibility when you're coming in and trying to, direct things and tell people what to do, things like, hey, I've done that. And I think that was kind of even on my journey at Snowflake. A lot of the team respected that I was the first sales rep. A lot of the team respected that I knew how to sell the product really well. And I think those were pretty key elements of me growing up and recruiting people and then keeping people at Snowflake and leading from the front that way. So, yeah.
And it sounds like a common thread across Snowflake overall. You were in the weeds. You were building the first list.
Yes.
Denise was in the weeds, sitting down with salespeople.
Yes.
And many of the CEOs also were able to actually get in the weeds. Speak to a little bit around the CEOs that you worked under and how they actually got into the weeds, because I know one in particular was good at that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and that's a thing that was surprising to me. So I joined under Mike Spicer, who was really, I guess the acting CEO. He was in 1 day a week. So it was a pseudo CEO. And then they hired Bob Muglia. And Bob had run, Satya Nadella used to work for Bob at Microsoft. Bob had a very infamous exit out of Microsoft, but he was a president of the server and tools division. He had 10,000 plus people working for him. Wow. And so he came in and there was 30 employees, and I'm like, maybe 50. And he came in as a CEO 9 months in my tenure, And I'm thinking, how the hell is this guy going to be successful? Because he's been so far up here. He's had, assistants. His assistants maybe had assistants, right?
Yeah.
So he just had, this. And I'm like, no way can he be successful. And to Bob's credit, he was the best. Snowflake would not have been successful without Bob. He invented our pricing. He helped so many parts of the product. We borrowed Bob's credibility to get in front of customers. There were so many wonderful things about Bob, and Bob got into it. And I'll give you a perfect example of how he there are two examples. Is number one, like he came in and wanted to redo the customer contract. So every time we signed a contract, we had to negotiate the contract. And he came in and he increased the number of pages by like 4 pages. He added 1,000 words to the contract, and I got furious. And I sent him a note and I said, Bob, you've doubled the size of the contract. You've increased the number of words by 1,000. You're screwing us over. And he goes, I have one question for you. I'm like, what's that? He's like, did you read it? And I'm like, no. And so he's like, do me a favor, read it.
Right.
And redline the things that you don't like about the contract. And so I mean, it was just an invaluable lesson that gave me, is that I read it and maybe better at selling the product, first of all, because I better understood the contract. I then redlined things, and he took the time to actually walk me through, okay, I understand why you don't want that, and we'll take that out, but here's why we have to have this. And he walked me through it. And so like, that was just like this like incredible development, point for me of learning from Bob. And the other thing that he did, which I love just being a salesperson, is, it's very public on whether or not, salespeople are successful, because it's like you have a quota, and are you hitting the company number or not? And so every quarter from the beginning of time, I would always talk about like, either how many people are in beta of the trying the product, or are we hitting our numbers, et cetera, et cetera. And we were trying to get to general availability in June of 2015. And this was like January, and we're like, okay, these are the feature sets that we declare victory and say we're generally available. And so what Bob did is every Monday we would have a company meeting. And I would talk about, the customers I had and whatever, and how we're doing on deals. What Bob did was he then created this list and then assigned each engineer to a feature that was required for Snowflake declare generally available. And then in that Monday meeting, he'd be like, hey, Allison, hey, Abdul, hey, Ashish, how are you doing in this feature? And those were incredible engineers that I just listed, but I think there were some that weren't so incredible, that were not executing on those features. And every week they'd get out there and they'd hate it. They'd be like, wow, this is terrible. I'm being called out for not doing my job. And to me, I'm like, yeah, I need those features to go sell the product. And so Bob, like, forcibly, he didn't yell at them, but there was this peer pressure to be like, hey, hey, Joe over there, you're not doing what you need to do. Go do it. So yeah. So there were a bunch of stuff like that. So Bob was like kind of the, so much into the details. And, Snowflake's current CEO, Sridhar Ramaswamy, is like in the details at scale that it's just unbelievable, the amount of information that he can take on. I've never seen anything like it. So there's different levels. And Slootman was more of a general. Like he would pick up on, he would read the room, he'd read people, like all this stuff really, really well. Just different leaders, but all of them incredible leaders. So
it's a common thread I hear around some of the most exceptional leaders being able to balance the strategy, but also be in the details.
Totally. I think you can get too wrapped up in the details sometimes. I think you have to think about and I think my opinion about what makes a great CEO, I do think that product leaders make the best CEOs. People always ask me like, hey, Chris, do you want to be a CEO? And no, the answer is no. And I think product leaders are great because they have to think, in the future. They have to think about, have a vision for the company and stuff like that. So yeah, I think those are things that are incredibly important to the company. And so that's why I think highly of product leaders. For sure.
Super interesting point.
Yeah.
And you did a lot right along the journey. but there's also all the stories behind the scenes
Yeah.
of any high growth company.
Yep.
What were some of the near death experiences at Snowflake?
Yeah, I mean, one of the classic ones, that was quite scary is we went generally available in June of 2015, and in our first full fiscal year as a generally available product was in 2016, and so we did a half year of $3 million, and then we were on the path to have really great growth the following year, and it was going really well. And we had started to hire a bunch of sellers. So I thought, it'd be great to have the sales team, come in, get them together and do a rah-rah mid-year. So we did a mid-year sales kickoff in San Francisco at the W Hotel. And I get in front and there's, I don't know, maybe like 50 people in the room. And I'm, talking about how great, what all these exciting customers, how great it is. And, a lot of the sales reps, their phones are going off. And then I'm like, okay, we're going to bring Bob in, and Bob's going to speak, but Bob wants to talk to me. So I go out to the hallway, doors are shut, Bob's white. And I'm like, what's wrong? He's like, Snowflake was down, and we're software as a service. We run the service.
Right.
And he's like, Snowflake's down, and we were in one region in AWS US West. And he's like, I'm not sure we're coming back. And I'm like, just telling everyone how great a company we are, and we like the founders can't get, like, they're like open heart surgery, like trying to like make the heart pump again.
Yeah.
And and so I looked at Bob and I said, Bob, we're gonna come back, and I need you to get out and instill confidence in the sales team and tell them it's gonna be okay, and tell them we're gonna build this great company. And to his credit, he flipped the switch, got out there, got everyone excited, and 4 hours later we came back online. So it was a pretty incredible experience and wild. That was as close to death as we came. But I mean, I remember being so Fidelity was a big early adopter of Snowflake. They did a lot of press around us and stuff like that. And so this is just as people were taking meetings again from COVID, and I went out to go meet the CIO and the CTO of Fidelity in Boston at the same time. And I walk into their office. This is my first meeting with them. And I walk in the office and I'm looking at them, and all of a sudden their phones are going off and they're like, hey, Snowflake's not working right now. No. And I'm like, okay, I'm trying to get a deal from these guys. And I'm like, okay. And I'm texting like CEO, I'm texting the engineering team. And it was just like one of these stupid mistakes where someone forgot to renew a license key for our encryption or flip the encryption key.
Small.
It was so dumb, but it brought the entirety of Snowflake down again. So there's like those types of experiences. You're like, oh my God, like, we're lucky to be alive. And I'm super grateful, especially for our earliest customers at Snowflake that took a risk, that stayed with us, because there were some bumpy times. There was a lot of outages we had in the beginning, and they stuck with us. So I'm super grateful for that. So, yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Those are some scary times.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, some scary times, but also some really incredible and strategic go-to-market moves along the journey.
Yes.
Curious, reflecting back on the journey, what were some of the most pivotal moves that you did, or things that you remember from that go-to-market evolution?
Yeah, I think so. The focus of new logo acquisition was super important. And so, when I started at Snowflake, Mike Spicer, the reason that we stayed as a stealth mode company for a while is Mike was super paranoid because we were competing against the largest companies in the world. We were competing against an Amazon product, and we had Amazon as our back end service. And so he's like, we have to get market share before the competition gets product. And so, okay, understood. And so my hyper focus as a company was every single sales rep would have a gate of, they would have to get, depending on the segment that they covered of customers, they'd have to get between 4 and 8 new logos in a quarter. That was really strategic, because like forcing to get customer after customer after customer, getting to use the product, that was and hiring sales reps that had experience opening up new logos. These were critical things that we did at the beginning. And candidly, like there were times, at the company where we got lazy and we took our eye off the ball on customer acquisition, and that hurt the company. And fortunately, Sridhar, helped us rectify that as he came in, and Snowflake's re-accelerating that customer acquisition strategy. But I think that's the most important thing for us from a go-to-market standpoint was acquiring new customers. And the hyper focus and celebrating that, even Snowflake to this day on earnings calls talks about the number of global 2000 customers that they have, that they've added, and stuff like that. And Wall Street reacts to that. So super important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And expansion is a big thing that right now a lot of companies are focused on. Yes, acquisition, but expansion. I'm curious your thoughts. Like, of course, acquisition applies now broadly, but how do you think about the balance as you're advising companies now and startups between acquisition and expansion and upsell?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. And a lot of companies now are consumption models. So Snowflake's a consumption model, and so we focused on just getting the customer first, and so typically an acquisition was really almost like a paid pilot. Our average deal size, even when I left, was, depending on the segment, anywhere between $40,000 and $60,000. So these weren't like huge deals. It was just like, hey, there's a paid pilot that we're going to do, and so we did that, and then you'd land the customer, and that was, we would only sell one thing, a Snowflake credit. So there was no necessarily other features to sell. There was use cases. So then what you start to do is try to identify use cases, and then have the sales team, both the sales engineer and the sales rep, put that in Salesforce, track the use case win. Are we winning it? Are we losing it? Are we selling professional services with it? So that was a huge focus of ours, and really, because the sales reps got paid both on a booking of a new deal, but also consumption, they were highly motivated to get the customer to do the deal, but also get the customer to successfully use the product. So I think what I would say to founders is make sure that the sales team is incented not only just to acquire new customers, but also to make sure the customers use the product. That's the biggest thing, is you don't want just these hitmen to come in and do a deal and then leave, because that becomes problematic, and the sales rep doesn't really care. And a lot of times what people do is say, I'm going to have this customer success team take over. Well, what happens, like, if the customer success team isn't getting responses, maybe you have to almost resell the deal. A lot of times a competition came in, they have a new CIO that came in, something like that. So I think, giving the sales team a quota on consumption or expansion is incredibly important. And then it's also on the company. So, I spend time with founders talking about pricing. And a lot of times maybe they're just trying to, when you're building a company, you're just hoping that companies pay you something to use your product. And so there's a lot of mistakes that founders can make early on around pricing. And so you don't want to sell everything in the first deal. You want to figure out how to modularize your pricing, or if you have consumption based, then you can go and focus on different use cases, certain things that you have to look at as you're pricing the product. And so I spend time now with founders thinking through, okay, you can add these features, you can add these modules, or this is how you forecast use cases and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of different ways to do it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know you preferred that sales continuity as opposed to passing off to customer success. And I've seen that pattern with a lot of companies, like Customer with a K, for example, where CS and sales have the same ownership to create alignment.
Yes.
Do you think that scales? Like, as Snowflake scaled to the point that it did?
So when Frank Slootman came in, I didn't have customer success. I didn't have professional services.
Yeah.
And then he put that underneath me. And so when Frank came in, he said, hey, look, you're going to take over customer success. You're going to take over professional services. And he said, on customer success, it's costing the company $3 million. So therefore, Chris, it's costing you, your budget it's $3 million. And it's only going to grow if we scale this function out. And so then I'm like, okay, let me go figure out what they do. And I would interview, or I went and, asked the people in customer success, like, what do you do? Are you technical enough to be an SE? Are you good enough to be a sales rep? Are you, all these other things? And the answer was they're helping a customer find the right people in the organization. They're helping a customer look at, the documentation or training, but they don't have any particular skill that's going to like help the customer use the product. They're just kind of a navigating person through the organization. So I got rid of it. I said, we don't, you can go apply for other jobs at Snowflake, but we're no longer having customer success because ultimately, as Frank Slootman would say, and Mike Scarpelli, the CFO, would say of Snowflake was, hey, look, the customer success is the job of everyone at this company. And you need to put it on the sales rep and the SE. The SEs are incredibly important. And then we had a professional services team that we had to build, and they built all of our our training materials. They built our best practices on how to implement the product. And so we would sell professional services. So from my standpoint, our PS organization was built from the ground up, not as like this huge revenue generation, but it was cost neutral. So we would say, okay, we're not going to lose money on our professional services team. I would say when we would sell professional services in a deal, the customer would be way more successful. So then the sales reps started to realize like, okay, I need to get professional services in these deals. And that's how we looked at customer success. It's not that I'm against it. I'm just against free. Like there has to be some value, and the customer has to pay for it.
Yeah, so, for sure. Yeah. I love that model. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
And, you mentioned near-death experiences beforehand, what you did well. What were the moments in a way, now looking back, that would have been really pivotal in terms of competition? There was Databricks, there were others in the picture. Like, what did that look like? And
I think there's, look, hindsight's always 20/20. It's super easy to like Monday morning quarterback, all the mistakes we made. But I think there were a couple of things. I think number one, Snowflake was we had the go-to-market engine, and we were building this machine to go out and acquire a bunch of new logos. There were two things that we were missing in the marketplace, and that Databricks gravitated to. Databricks, a lot of data engineers wanted to use Spark as an analytic platform, and so Databricks kind of did really well there. And then they also had these data science notebooks for data scientists. And if Snowflake had built a Spark connector and done a data science notebook, and then at the same time, the sales org, if we had continued to scale the sales org and focus on new customer acquisition, I think we would have pretty much put Databricks out of business. And we gave them an inch and they took a mile, and they're obviously a very successful company. The other thing that you can argue is like they're successful, and they're not public. So a lot of the things they say don't have to be 100% true publicly. Whereas a public company, you're very much, you have to say things that are true. Like Databricks does a lot of reselling of AI technology. So like they resell OpenAI, they resell other AI technologies. That's like a reseller business. It's like a single digit margin business, but it's top line revenue. Mm-hmm. They're not reporting to Wall Street on their margin. Mm-hmm. Snowflake has to do that. So Snowflake could not do the same things financially that they can do. And so there's an argument, like if the private markets will fund you, there's a argument to stay private for as long as you can. If you want to build this ginormous company, and it's worked well so far for them. So I don't know, there's a bunch of things along the way that on the sales side, I wish that we had been more aggressive. On the product side, I wish we had been more aggressive. But at the same time, we also did a great job on competing against the three cloud service providers and while building on top of their platform, whether it was competing with Amazon's Redshift product or EMR, whether it was competing against the different variations that Microsoft has or Google's BigQuery product on top of their platform. That says a lot about the how great of a product we had, and we built a really strong go-to-market motion on doing that. So,
incredible. Yeah. And do you think going public was the right move then for Snowflake?
It was super helpful that it gave us credibility. So what would happen when I would try to sell deals? So customers would put us as the back end product to their their product. So we back end a customer facing analytic application. And if as a private company, people didn't necessarily trust us. And so they'd ask us for our financials. In the event we went out of business, they wanted our source code and all this other stuff, which we would do. We would not give them our source code. So, so once we became public, it was like validation to the market that we were this like real company.
Pure
and so
transparency.
that helped. And we were the largest software IPO, I think still are. I'm sure one of these AI companies will crush us and come out, but we were the largest software IPO ever. And that also was like, okay, this is a juggernaut. And so then people were more comfortable betting on us.
Yeah.
And for the employees, it turned out really well. I mean, never in my wildest imaginations did I ever think that Snowflake would get over $100 billion of a market cap, and we did. And that was like crazy. Like on the IPO day, you just watch the stock go up, and you're like, "Holy cow! Like what is happening?" Right? And so that was a really cool experience, and it gave liquidity to the employees. So for the employees, I think it was great. I think from a company validation, it was great. But yeah, there are some benefits. Pluses and minuses to being public, for sure.
Makes sense. And you mentioned AI companies coming in and potentially, having even larger of an exit and liquidity event.
Yeah, for sure.
You have lived through the .com bubble.
Yes.
And boom.
Yes.
I'm curious what you think about AI now. Do you think that we're in a bubble?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, we are, and there's a lot of, and partnering with different venture capital firms, seeing how they value these AI companies, it's bonkers. It's crazy, the evaluations that people are getting. And it will eventually have a reckoning. But, I heard someone say this on CNBC the other day. There was some great things that came out of the internet. The internet is more powerful than ever today. Yeah. The .com bubble was the beginning of that. And so there was a lot of terrible companies. I worked for some of those terrible companies. But at the end of the day, the internet powered Google. The internet powered so many different things that, like AWS and or Amazon. And there are all these things that came out of the internet. So yes, there is a bubble. Yes, it will pop. But there are real things with AI. Like, I'm partnering with two AI companies in particular that are doing a bunch of automation. So I'm partnering with this company called Giga ML. They do customer service agents, and they're legitimately replacing, call centers in some of the largest companies in the world. And that will have a bottom line impact to those companies, because these large Fortune 500, they're reducing the amount of people they need to hire. So that's a big deal. There's a code company called Factory.ai, same thing. They're helping people develop code without having to have a bunch of engineers. So there's a bunch of efficiencies that will come out of AI. And so, yeah, but there's also a bunch of bloat, and there's a bunch of companies that probably won't make it. And so it'll be interesting to watch for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And now you're advising a lot of companies since you left Snowflake.
Yes.
Super tactical, but I'm curious what you're seeing in terms of sales methodologies, because, 8 years ago when you were on the Sales Hacker podcast, which GTM now acquired in 2023, so we rolled it up under this brand, you were talking about MedPick. And it's so funny because you were describing it, the interviewer had never heard of it, and you were describing it because it was quite new.
Yeah.
And now it's so commonly known and practiced. I don't think there's a sales leader out there that doesn't know it, even if they go by a different sales methodology.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on sales methodologies for companies you're advising or other sales leaders? What's kind of best practice?
I'm still a fan of MedPick. And I think it's just like think of MedPick as your compass to getting a deal. Like you're out in the woods, you're lost. You can go to the MedPick to kind of figure out, like, do we have these things to get the deal? And I think that methodology is super important. So I'm a huge fan of the building sales organizations who have MedPick as the back end. And it's candidly, when I interview sales leaders, I'm looking for that. Like what experience do you have? What sales methodology? How diligent are you in managing your team behind that sales methodology? So those are things that are incredibly important. And so I do think that even now as I'm interviewing sales leaders, I am asking them what methodologies do they use. It doesn't have to be MedPick. I'm not like, oh my gosh, if you don't have MedPick, you're not going to be great. But tell me about whatever methodology you're using, and how do you manage your team by that? And that's what I'm looking for from a sales leader. So
Yeah, because we commonly get across the GTM fund portfolio a lot of companies that are looking to hire sales reps that have strong methodology, irregardless of what type, but just strong training around a methodology. So it's interesting to hear that you are kind of averse to different types too.
Yes.
It's more about the actual muscle.
It's the muscle. It's are you actually getting up every single day? Are you actually diligent about it or not? And I think that's the big thing that you really have to ask and look at, because there are the people talk about it. It's like almost like values. Like, you can put values of your company up on the wall and say those are our values, but are you living your values? And that's the same thing on the methodology. Are you living the methodology? That's really important for me to figure out.
For sure. And now, what does life look like post Snowflake after 11 years?
It's crazy. It's weird to not like have a number that I'm chasing every quarter. But I what I've recognized about my experience at Snowflake is I think my most favorite time at Snowflake was probably the zero to call it $150, $200 million. That was like the most exciting time. There was so much desperation, but that's what I really enjoy. And not the obviously I managed the sales team where this year they'll do north of $4 billion. That's something that I managed to. I managed a large organization, but I think the skill set that's really good for those types of organizations is more like an operations person. And I don't love doing operations. I like being in deals. I like closing deals. I like competing. That's like, and when you're doing that at an early stage startup, that's like the fun. And so now I pretty much am advising companies in that range, the zero, like literally have no revenue, all the way up to $200 million or $150 million in revenue, and that's where I spend my energy. So and so that's what I'm doing is I'm busy, but on my schedule, on my terms. If I don't want to do something, I don't do it.
And you documented the entire go-to-market journey in this book. Make
it snow.
What do you hope that anyone reading this book takes away? If you could just say one thing that you hope that they get away from this book.
Look, I think that Denise and I, when Snowflake became public, we got a lot of people who wanted us to be advisors. We became pseudo tech famous, and so I would get, and I still get a lot of emails saying like, hey, how do I do this? Should I do this? So I think there's multiple examples where I would say that we talk about how we built the company. And the things that the do's and don'ts. And I think the thing that Denise and I recognize when we became advisors to companies is the dysfunction that founders can create between sales and marketing. And so one of the things that Denise and I had this wonderful working relationship, which Slootman. I would have to go to Slootman and say, hey, Frank, I'm being asked to be an advisor to this company. Is it okay? I'd have to get his approval. And he's an intimidating dude. And he'd say you should, because you'll end up seeing how screwed up other companies are. And I was like, okay, whatever, dude. And he was right. Like, sometimes it's like, you have a bunch of friends, they're married, they have kids or whatever, and you're like, oh, their lives are perfect. But then you get in the inside, it's like, it's not so perfect. And that's the same thing with companies, is like, they're all screwed up. Every single one of them.
Grass is never greener.
It's never greener. So I think that's the thing that I'm, it was helpful for me to see. And I think that's what I'd say to founders is like, you don't want to have this competitive, like sales is doing this and marketing is doing this. No, they're the go-to-market team. Partner together, build a great go-to-market machine. And if it's not working, understand why it's not working. But if you're a founder and you're creating this like animosity, like, hey, marketing is creating a bunch of leads, but sales, you're not closing those leads. Well, okay, let's dig into why. Don't make each other just throw up scoreboard type numbers and don't understand why you're not getting what the end result you want. So I think that's the biggest thing that Denise and I focused on, was the partnership and what we focused our partnership on the go-to-market side.
Yeah. I mean, that is the go-to-market engine, like you said.
That's right.
So that alignment is critical.
That's right.
Super valuable.
Yep.
And you've been on the writing side of a book. Are there any books that you've consumed and read that have been particularly impactful in your career?
In my career, well, I mean,
Or life.
yeah,
Just life
yeah,
overall.
yeah, no, so John McMahon, he's someone I really look up to, and he has the qualified sales leader that he's built. I don't love reading. I do audibles, and I just listen to a book, really just a life book about the economy and stuff like this called Abundance, which I think is super cool book as well. So there's stuff like that. But I think I love biographies. I love learning about people and stuff like that. I love listening to podcasts.
Well, this has been fantastic,
Thanks
Chris.
for
Really
having me.
appreciate the time.
I
I'm glad we
appreciate
could run it back 8 years later under a different name, having acquired Sales Hacker. But here we are on the other
Amazing.
side.
Well, I appreciate you. You're so super kind for having me. Thank you for having me, and it was great speaking to you.
Absolutely. Wonderful speaking with you. Where can people follow along your journey? Obviously the book, but
LinkedIn. Yeah. I'm trying to be better about posting stuff on LinkedIn and stuff like that. And reach out via LinkedIn.